I used to think time zones would make the whole traveling the world as a therapist completely undoable. Spoiler alert, it didn't, but I did have to figure some things out. Hello, I'm Annie, a psychologist and a digital nomad therapist, and for the past 2.5 years, I've been traveling the world while running my US-based private practice. I've seen clients from Morocco, Thailand, and Bali, and so time zones have definitely been something I've had to navigate, especially since my clients are in the DC area. So today, I wanted to share with you all my wisdom and what actually worked and what I've learned along the way. Tip number 1 is to do your time zone research first. The first thing I want you to do is to make a list of all of the countries that you think that you would want to travel while also seeing patients. Then I want you to download this app Time Buddy, where it allows you to put different time zones and stack them to be able to compare what time it is in each of those time zones so that you can figure out where are the overlapping times that you could see clients. This also allows you to see if a country is one that you can work in, or is it one that you should probably just vacation in because the time zone overlap just doesn't work. For example, I really want to go to Sri Lanka, but the way the time zone works from the East Coast to Sri Lanka time would mean that I would be working like literally in the middle of the night, like 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., which is not something I'm willing to do. And so Sri Lanka will have to be a country that I just visit on vacation. Tip number 2 is to minimize how often you're actually changing your schedule. So when you decide that you want to be a digital nomad therapist and you're going to be traveling the world, you're probably going to want to change your schedule at least once or twice. Obviously, you don't have to, but if traveling is something that you want to do longer term, it can really help to make this lifestyle more sustainable if you're able to change your schedule. But once again, to make it sustainable, you probably don't want to change it more often than once a quarter. This is for 2 reasons. The first is for your benefit. Managing work from a different time zone can be a lot of mental labor. And so if you're changing your time zone often, that just really adds to all the time calculations you're having to do in your mind. And it could also lead to you confusing your schedule, potentially messing up session times. And so I think the longer you're in a certain time zone traveling, the easier it will be for you to adjust and to have that kind of mental stability around when you're working. It's for also the client's benefit. I think nowadays there's definitely this trend in the private practice therapist world that you need to make decisions that are best for you. And while I 100% agree with that, I think as therapists, there are just some natural limitations to that. Like we are providing a service. And so we do need to be very mindful of the service we're providing and making sure we're providing good care. And since we are doing really deep, emotional, oftentimes trauma work, I think that trying to provide a consistent space for our clients can really go a long way. I think this really just helps provide that consistent space to help people feel safe to do the deeper emotional work. Like if you're changing your schedule every other week, not all, but I do think some clients would find this very hard to feel like you are reliable, especially if they have parents that were negligent or were unreliable or unpredictable. This is obviously just my clinical opinion. You're welcome to have a different opinion, but I just think that it's something to consider. I also don't think that you should go as far as like, oh, well, the client needs a consistent space, so I shouldn't become a digital nomad therapist. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But I just think that there is a happy medium. And so minimizing the amount of time you're changing your schedule can be helpful for your clinical work. For example, I'm in Morocco, which can be a different time zone from certain parts of Europe if it's like daylight saving times, because they don't change daylight savings here in Morocco. So let's say I'm traveling to Morocco or Portugal, which is in the same time zone, and then I want to travel to maybe Turkey or Spain. You know, those are in 3 different time zones, but are going to have overlapping schedules. So it kind of helps is a happy medium. Or for example, if I'm maybe going to Japan and also want to go to Thailand or South Korea, those are all probably similar time zones that I can group together. Okay, tip number 3 is going to be how to actually talk to your clients about it. For new clients, or let's say you don't have a private practice yet, but are going to start one to be able to travel the world, something that I think is really helpful is to bake this into your onboarding or intake process. So something that I've recently done is that I created an intake document that is different from the informed consent, but just highlights some helpful information for my new clients to know about my practice and kind of how I do things. And one of those things is telehealth. So letting them know that, some best practices around telehealth, like my background changes, but I'm always going to be in a private, secure, confidential location, and also asking them to do the same. But something else I have on there is talking about how I usually go about scheduling. And for me personally, I like scheduling people in one time, and that's their consistent time from week to week. But in there, I say, that's kind of how we do it. We'll have one consistent schedule. Since I do travel at times or certain things might come up on my end, I may need to change that time a couple times a year, but I would let them know at least a month in advance. And then obviously if they need to change their time, that's something that we can also look at. I think this just really helps set the expectation for them to know kind of what to expect. And also when it does happen, I don't feel like I'm like blindsiding them with needing to change the time. Because I do think some people get really attached to the time they have therapy. And so just making sure that they know beforehand can just help ease the change a little bit. It's obviously not a guarantee. Some people do leave, and that's something that we can't control. But I think this is just a way to help give a good customer experience. Because at the end of the day, we are providing a service. Now, I think as always, you get to decide how much you want to disclose to people and how much you want to stay private. But something you could say is that you're going to be traveling and so that you're going to be needing to change the session time from time to time. Or you could just cross that bridge when it comes to it. Like when you do need to change your time, you can just say that your schedule is shifting and so you need to change your time. But if you do want to be upfront about your digital nomad lifestyle, that's something you obviously can do. But when I need to change my schedule, typically what I do is I give my clients at least a month in advance warning, and I let them know that my schedule will be shifting and that I will need to be changing their session time, and I'll give them the date that it will need to change. And I'll say, this is something we can look at now, or if you need to look at your schedule, the session times I will be having are going to be shifting to the morning. And then I'll say, like, it's something we can talk about next time, but I did just want to provide them that kind of advanced warning. And so something that I do on the back end is that I'll look at that schedule, that new work schedule, given the new time zone, and I'll think about my clients. Now, some of my clients have a more rigid schedule, while other clients have a more flexible schedule. And so for the clients that have a very rigid schedule, I'll try to think about what time might be best for them. And I will offer it to them and say, I think this is the time that could work for us. And then if they agree, then I'll schedule them during that time. And if it doesn't, we'll obviously kind of go through and see what works for them. But so I do try to come in with an idea of what time to offer them, because obviously if you're changing all of your session times, that can get quite confusing when you're trying to manage, 12 to 15 schedules of patients and 20, more if you have more clients. And so I just try to think through and plan what I think would work best for people. Now, I know for me, I was so scared about changing my schedule. Like when I first went to Morocco, I didn't change my schedule at all and was working until 1 or 2 a.m. And I'll talk about this later. It ended up working out. But when I did finally decide to change my schedule, I was so scared that people were going to leave. I know for me that I can really struggle with needing to prioritize the client's needs and not wanting to make many changes because of fear that they might get mad at me or that change won't work and then they'll leave. But honestly, in my experience, I have changed my schedule maybe 3 or 4 times at this point. And 99% of the time, it has worked for most people. We have been able to find a new time. But there has been one person that did decide to leave, but I think there were other kind of circumstances around it. In my mind, I feel like one person or 1 or 2 people leaving is much better than trying to run yourself into the ground by staying location dependent in the same city or working until 4 or 5 a.m. Like if you want to go to Asia and you don't change your schedule, you will be working in the middle of the night because of that time difference. And maybe you're a night owl and that works for you. But for me, I've decided that that's not something I'm willing to do. And I'm okay if I lose one or two clients. Even though I hate losing clients and that's really sad, that's a whole nother story. At this point, just kind of accepted that that's a part of life and that's a part of private practice. People leave for a variety of reasons, and I can't dictate my life around someone potentially needing to leave. But ultimately, I have found that if you try to be really mindful and communicate early and set expectations with your clients, most people are quite understanding. And I also try really hard to make space and be thoughtful about the different feelings they might have about it. Like some clients might find it frustrating that their time is different, or they might feel kind of nervous about my background changing or my schedule changing. Like, does that mean that there's something happening on my end? And so I just really try to look out for like that fear or anger or whatever, and try to name it and make space for it. And I think this really goes a long way for my patients. Okay, now I want to share my personal experience and how my work schedule has worked in the 2.5 years that I have been a digital nomad therapist. So if you are new here, you might not know my story, but I decided to shut down my Arlington, Virginia private practice and moved my entire life to Washington State and to live with my parents because I knew sometime in the future I wanted to travel and be a therapist. But I didn't have kind of like a sense of when I wanted to do it. But 3 weeks after my move, I went on a 2-week vacation to Morocco and loved it so much. I was like, I ain't leaving, I'm staying. And so I decided to impulsively take a deep dive into the digital nomad life and extended my trip for a month and was working from Morocco. 2 weeks into that trip, I met my husband, so that 1-month extension turned into much longer. But when it came to working, since I had literally just moved from in-person to virtual and moved from Virginia to Washington, and my clients obviously had a lot of feelings about that, I didn't feel like I had the space to instill another change. And so I kept my schedule exactly the same that it was as if I was going to be working in the States. And so at the time, my client schedule was in the East Coast time, because that's where my clients are, was around noon until maybe 7 or 8 p.m. In Morocco time, that meant I was working around 5 p.m. until midnight or 1 a.m. some nights. And then because Morocco doesn't do the whole time change thing like we do in America, during a certain time of the year, that turned into 2 a.m. And so I was definitely doing a very different work-life schedule than I was in the States. I would tell a lot of people what my schedule was, and they would be like, oh my God, how are you doing it? And while it was hard, I think the most surprising thing is that I actually really loved it. I think in the States, you work, a maybe more typical 9 to 5, or like me, I was kind of working evenings so that I could have like the morning off. And for me as a therapist, after I get done seeing clients, I don't have a lot of mental or emotional energy to do much after work. So I would get done and go home and just veg on the couch and watch Netflix or scroll on my phone. And so it felt like during the work days, I didn't have much time to actually live my life. But here in Morocco, since I was working in the evenings, I had the whole day to do what I wanted. And since I had just met my partner, I was obviously exploring that connection. I was exploring this beautiful coast of Morocco, which is where I currently am. Go visit different beaches, do surf lessons. I just had the freedom to really live my life. And then around 4 p.m., I'd go to a local coffee shop and have a coffee to get ready to stay up until 1. And then I would see my clients, get done at 1, and go to sleep. And that's something that I really enjoy. Like, I loved having that freedom during the day. And that worked for me for a really long period of time. I had that schedule from about September 2023 until February 2024. Then we went to Thailand for the first time, and Bali. And so those are like similar time zones. So I'm just going to say my schedule for both of those. In the East Coast, I had changed my schedule a bit so to congregate people more in the evenings. So in the East Coast, I was working more around like 3 or 4 p.m. until maybe 8 or 9 p.m. given the day, which was 3 or 4 a.m. in Thailand till about 8 a.m., 9 a.m. And then because from the East Coast to that time zone, there wasn't as many overlapping times, I did also have to see someone in the morning time in the East Coast, like 8 a.m., which was then 8 p.m. in Thailand and Bali. Now, this schedule was a lot harder for me. And once again, I could just do what I wanted during the day. Like we would go and just relax in the beach. But it was a little bit harder for me just because when I would go to sleep, I would become very anxious and paranoid that my alarm wasn't going to go off, that for some reason I wasn't going to wake up. So that one was just personally a little bit harder for me, but did work for a period of time. Like the 3 months, like it was doable, but I definitely felt a little bit burnt out at the end. And so most certainly revisited my schedule when I went to Thailand a second time, which I'll explain in a second. Then in June 2024, we came back to Morocco and I obviously had the same schedule. So I was seeing people in the East Coast time in the evenings, which was my nighttime in Morocco. Now, this continued to work until I was pregnant, which then staying up until 1 or 2 a.m. was not doable anymore. And so I did the thing of changing my schedule from the evening time in the East Coast to the morning time. And I was really nervous to make this change, but I think because of just the practical limitations of being pregnant, I was like, I don't care. Like, this needs to change. This is not working for me. And so I changed it to the morning time in the East Coast, which was around 8 a.m. until maybe noon time, which was probably 1 p.m. until 5 or 6 p.m. here in Morocco. Now, this didn't give me the whole day to explore, but I still had the mornings and the evenings to kind of enjoy the beach or watch the sunset. Now, one person did leave when I had made this change, which was really hard and I felt really guilty, but it really changed so much. And I was like, why did I not do this earlier? It was just a lot easier for me. Then when we went to Thailand to give birth to my daughter, I kept the same East Coast time. I was seeing them in their morning time, but it was my evening time in Thailand. And it honestly worked out because I wasn't seeing clients until 1 a.m. It was more so of seeing clients until like 11 p.m., which worked a lot better for me. And is something that if I go back to Thailand, I will continue to do. So overall, I've definitely worked in so many different time zones and have found that I have been able to make each of those time zones work. Obviously it isn't the typical 9 to 5 time that you would have in America, but I really enjoyed it. And sometimes you can get creative. Like for example, like if your clients have a more rigid schedule, you might need to start seeing clients on Sundays or Saturdays or Fridays or something. Like I just think that there is a lot more wiggle room than I think we let ourselves have. And so it's something to play around with for sure. Definitely, if you're finding that you're not quite sure what to do with your schedule, leave a comment below. I would love to help you think through how you can make it work for you. Okay, my last bonus tip that is a little bit more practical is to keep the device you're seeing your clients, like your computer, in the time zone that your clients are in. I think this just like really helps you mentally kind of get in the space of where your clients are, that while you're in session, you're looking at the time and it's the same time for them. This for me just helps me kind of orient myself to what maybe they're going through or what time it is for them, things like that. And it also really helps with scheduling because if your device is set to a certain schedule, then when you're looking at your calendar is typically going to also be in that same time zone. And then I keep my phone during my local time. And so having that as a reference point and then looking at the computer and it having the client's reference point just helps a lot with not having to do as many mental calculations. Another tip is to, if you have an iPhone, there's like a little widget you can put on your phone screen that has 3 different time zones. And so you can put it your time zone, or obviously your time zone is going to be on your phone, and then the time zone for your clients. And, if you work from multiple time zones, you can do that way. And that also helps just, do some mental calculations. So time zones on the outside can feel like a really huge obstacle that might stop a lot of therapists from thinking that it's possible to live your best travel life and still do the meaningful work of being a therapist. And yeah, I do think there's a learning curve and you might potentially need to do some Tetris, but if this is something that you really dream about and is something you really want, when there is a will, there is a way, and it is 100% doable. There are thousands, and I mean thousands of therapists currently running a US-based private practice while working all over the world, and we're all making it work. And so definitely don't think that this is something, if you really want it, that it isn't possible for you, because it is definitely possible for you. We just might need to get a little creative. Now, if you watched this video and you thought, wow, oh my God, I could actually make this work, but what does that mean? How do I do it? I have a freebie for you. I created my 8-week checklist to becoming a digital nomad therapist, walking you through the different steps you need to take to transition or build a private practice that allows you to be location independent. So if that's something that you want to check out, the link will be in the description below. And like I said, if you have any concerns or worries about different time zones in your situation, definitely leave a comment below and I will personally respond to them to help you figure out how you can make it work for you. And if you found this video helpful, definitely hit like and subscribe for future content all about creating a flexible private practice, seeing clients online, and building a life that actually feels good to you. And if you like this video, definitely watch this next one. Bye!